Hi everyone, welcome to our ATAR Notes September lecture series. So here at ATAR Notes, we've got heaps of free resources from hundreds of downloadable study notes, these lectures that are running all this week, discussions, we've got videos, newsletters, we've got an ATAR calculator, study articles, and heaps more to check out on our website, atarnotes.com. My name's Sophia, and today I'm going to be taking you guys through the HSC Business Studies revision. We're going to get through a lot in 2 hours. A little bit about me before we get started. So my name's Sophia. I'm a business studies tutor here at ATAR Notes. I graduated in 2021, so 2 years ago now, with a 96.3 ATAR. And I've got some of my marks on the screen, but we're talking business studies, and I scored a 95 in my business exam. I'm studying a Bachelor of Secondary Education to become a high school teacher at the University of Sydney, and I'm going to be an English and Business Studies high school teacher. So I'm going to teach business studies in a school soon. I did business studies and I tutor business studies. So when it comes to business, I'm your girl. I'm your girl. I'm a massive Swiftie, but that's all that really matters about me. But yeah, we'll get started with the lecture. So today's plan, you guys already know, and you guys are probably drowning in terms of content for business because there's so much in the syllabus, and I'd love to go through all of it. But because we only do have the 2 hours for today's lecture, we're going to be going through operations, marketing, finance, and HR, but the hardest topics in each, along with most of the learn tos. So a lot of the learn tos are in here, and those are those dot points that they really do like to ask about in the HSC exam. But also just some of those harder dot points that a lot of students are getting wrong, because it can just help you wrap your head around that. I'm also going to have some final tips for your study in the end, but I'll be live on the chat as this lecture premieres. So if you guys have any questions as you go along, please ask me. Happy to help you guys out. One thing that I won't shut up about this whole lecture is how important the syllabus is. I can't stress it enough. It is the number one study trick. It will help you so much. And the way that the exam is, like, it's 100 marks, it's 3 hours, but there's so much content across the 4 functions that they can't even ask you on every single dot point anyways. So it's not really worth just knowing like a couple of them in like big detail, not knowing the rest. You're actually better off just knowing the whole syllabus pretty lightly, and then just being able to like low-key waffle on about some of the ideas. So I really recommend memorizing the syllabus in this 2-week school holiday period now. It's actually a great time to do it. Something that really helped me was just actively recalling it, like reading it out loud. Then when I knew it a bit better, I started using these fill-in sheets. So here on these slides, which by the way, you guys can download, there's a resource button somewhere on the screen, and you can download them and then come back to them later. But you can download these slides and access these fill-ins. I've got it for HR, for operations, for marketing, and for finance. And these really helped me memorize the syllabus. And right before my HSC exam, I actually was able to rewrite like the entire syllabus for each function on like a blank piece of paper, which might seem like really extreme now if you haven't like memorized it before. But if you use these sheets, it just gets so much easier. It helps you across every single section of the exam, because in multiple choice, there are some questions that literally come straight from the syllabus. Like, they're straight from the syllabus. You just need to memorize. You don't even need to actually know what any of the terms or the definitions actually mean. It's just like taken straight from the syllabus. For example, could ask you like, what are the 3 performance objectives for operation strategies? And if you had just memorized the syllabus, you'd instantly get that mark. And I've actually got that question from a past paper somewhere in this lecture to prove it to you guys. But also, in short answer, knowing the syllabus can just help make sure that you're picking the right processes and defining the right influences or the right strategies. For the business report, your headings and subheadings are all by the syllabus, and they're all going to be the different strategies, processes, or influences. And same for the case study essay. Just make sure you're writing about the right topic that's being assessed. So it's so important that you know the syllabus. I'm very sorry in advance. I'm going to keep like saying that over and over again. But my business studies teacher was a past HSC business exam marker, and one of his biggest things that he used to always say was, if you can memorize the syllabus, you will pass. That's how big it is. It will give you those identifying marks in most questions across the entire exam. And a lot of the time, when it comes to business studies, everyone's like, oh, it's all common sense. And most of the time it is. Other than finance, a lot of it's common sense. It's very straightforward, especially marketing and HR. It's a lot of stuff that we're already aware of. But it's got these like special words, and like the glossary and like the terms that they're using isn't what we're normally talking about. I'm going to go through that in the lecture as well. But a lot of the stuff that you've learned in business, you've probably had those moments where you're like, oh, I know a business that's done that. Oh, I've seen an ad like that, but maybe you haven't used the words. Like, a lot of you guys watching this will know like Mecca Beauty Loop and how you get the different gifts. But Mecca Beauty Loop is just a form of relationship marketing. and how they can kind of keep your loyalty just like Flybuys is. But when we get Mecca Beauty Loop, I was never like, wow, thank you for this relationship marketing, Mecca. Like, you just think like, oh, it's another gift. Like, you don't really think much more into it. So the good thing with the syllabus is that a lot of the stuff we already know, but it's not enough to just waffle on about it unless you can actually connect it to the term and the dot point, which is the syllabus. So I'm going to shut up about it now, but it's just very important. So I definitely recommend these. Another thing is, I'm not sure if you guys have seen me on the TikTok, but I've been running the ATAR Notes TikTok for just over 6 months now. And I've put all of my resources up for business studies. So one thing with business is, because there's so much content, some of you guys might have like heaps and heaps of notes. I had friends in my class that had like over 100 pages of notes for all the topics, and that's so normal because of how much content there is. Same if you're downloading notes from online or using a friend's. But one thing with business that's really hard is, before you go into the exam, you don't want to be like flicking through heaps and heaps of notes and trying to find like certain ideas. It's so much easier for your study and a lot more concise and effective if you have summaries. So what I did right before my exams, I made summaries for each of the topics. So these are just some examples, and I've got I can usually do it in like 5 pages, the ones that are on the TikTok, but I've got marketing 5 pages, finance in around 5, HR in 5, and um operations in 5. So I've got the four of them there, and it's just got everything, just the main straightforward points, just the general summary of it. And what really helped me is I could read through those. If I was reading through the notes, maybe I'm reading through on like market research, and I realized like, damn it, like I don't actually know this very well, then I would go back to my longer notes and my more detailed notes and read up on it a bit more. But right before the exam, the last thing you want to do is be going through heaps of notes. So if you do need some summary notes, they're all accessible for free on our TikTok, and you can download it. Not to give it clout, but like, if you guys need any resources, or if you'd like any videos just explaining a certain dot point, maybe a strategy, anything extra that isn't being mentioned in this lecture today, please let me know. You can write it in the chat, or even if you comment on TikTok, I'm happy to make videos and post any other resources if you guys would like any. So if you needed to, or you want to download my business summary notes, you can do that on our TikTok. Okay, let's get started. So we're going to start with operations, and we're going to go through some of the harder influences, processes, and strategies for operations. So one of those is globalization, and globalization comes across all the functions. So it's really important that you understand what it is, because a lot of the time you are going to be defining it, and it is quite common to be assessed in the HSC exam. So one of the learn tos is to examine the impact of globalization on the operation strategies. So I really recommend knowing a definition of globalization, only because, like I said, it is a learn to, and it does come up across the syllabus quite a bit. Here's one that we've got. So globalization refers to the removal of trade barriers between nations, and it's characterized by an increasing integration between national economies, as well as a high degree of transfer of capital, labor, financial resources, and technology. One thing that really worked for me, and I want to give you tips as I go along, was having flashcards with definitions of a lot of the like keywords from the syllabus. It just really helped me memorize the definitions a lot easier. And if I needed to work on memorizing, I could just do like 1 hour of active recall when I'm going through these flashcards or making these flashcards. For your short answers, 9 out of 10 times you're actually starting with the definition. So it's so important that you can define them well, and you're not really just like waffling out this random idea. So having ones, especially for ideas like this, and definitely definitions of the strategies, is really, really important. So the rise of globalization has allowed businesses to modify and implement new transformation processes to suit the changing global market, and then it acts as a source for market opportunities for domestic businesses to exploit. But you guys would know, when it comes to globalization, the biggest part with operations is that they're outsourcing their operations to other countries, which then of course has different problems when it comes to corporate social responsibility and ethics, but you guys are aware of that. So the purpose of globalization is to meet different needs of consumers worldwide, and businesses can do that by integrating different operations processes. So they can integrate product designs that meet the needs of global customers. A really good case study example that you can do for this is McDonald's, and how they have different menus depending on the country that you're in. So for example, some countries will only have halal meat. They've got choosing the location of manufacturing facilities, whether that's domestic or international, deciding on quality management logistics, and then assessing those quality management logistics as well. So I've got some case studies planted out throughout here as well, because it's so easy to just focus on the content. I feel like always when I was studying for business, I was just trying to get all my notes finished, really drive in on the content, but I was neglecting my case studies. And a lot of the time that meant that I didn't really have any good statistics or really strong ones. So at A Notes, we're very big on Qantas, and in my HSC, I did Qantas and Macca's, but I know that others are doing IKEA, Google. You can essentially write about any business. It's just important that you have some strong case studies. But if you guys have any questions about that, please leave them in the chat. So for Qantas, one of the biggest effects when it comes to globalization has got to do with outsourcing, because they've outsourced the non-core business functions like their maintenance and their IT to reduce operational costs, and they've outsourced that globally. This helps them access new markets as well, because more than 70% of the operations are geared to the global market, 50% of that being Asia, which then allows global recognition and long-term growth rather than just being like a domestic flyer in Australia. Another learn too, which I absolutely despise, anytime like government, globalization, or legal, honestly, economic as well, for me, I hate these influences passionately. I really didn't mind like social and technology because I feel like you just waffle, but these ones are ones that you actually need to know, and you genuinely need to know some government policies, and you genuinely need to be able to define globalization. You can't really get away with waffling because a lot of business, because we're so aware of it, like I said, if you can connect it to the syllabus, you'll get the marks if you waffled. And you guys would have seen that in your trials, that as long as you could connect it well and you're linking back to the right dot point, you would have gotten the marks. But for ideas like this, you can't waffle it out and get full marks unless you have those specifics. So I wanted to put this in the lecture for you guys. So government policies significantly affect operations management because they guide a business's decisions and how they operate in accordance with the law. That's regardless whether it's implemented by the local, state, or federal government, which is just going back to some of the Year 11 content. But government policies are always evolving, which means it's so important that businesses stay on top of those and that they account for those changes. Because if they don't comply with the correct regulations, it results in compliance costs, but also can mean that they're breaking laws, which leads to business shutdown, and loss of profitability. So we obviously don't want that. So one example of a government policy is the introduction of carbon pricing, which puts a price on carbon emissions, which has then encouraged businesses to produce less of those goods. But other policies revolve around taxation, work health and safety, training, environmental policy, etc. So here I've got a past trial question, and I wanted to put in this sample answer just so you guys can see how to structure your answers. So this one's saying an Australian manufacturer of surfboards has decided to alter their production process to take advantage of new technology. However, they will need to borrow money to finance the purchase of this new technology. So describe two government policies that could affect this business operations management, which means you actually have to identify two separate government policies, and you can't really just waffle about those. You actually have to know what the different policies are. So here's our sample answer for this one. So it starts with the judgment of the question, which is connecting the government policies to the operations management and why it's important for productivity. Then we've got one government policy that could affect this business is the Work Health Safety Act of 2011. And then we've also got that the business must comply with the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act of 1999. Now, when it comes to the laws, there are quite a few main ones that you do have to memorize for business, like the Competition and Consumer Act, for example. So I, again, recommend just putting those on flashcards because they do come up in multiple choice. But again, with especially short answers, you do need that detail. And a lot of the time, that's the mark where if you hadn't identified 1, 2, and you kind of just waffled on, the most you would have gotten was 2 out of 4. So you don't want to lose these easy marks just because you didn't memorize a piece of legislation. Trust me, I know it's annoying, but it's just something that you shouldn't really be ignoring in your study because it will result with loss of marks. But cause and effect is really important with your responses. So here it's giving a definition of what the piece of legislation, the government policy is, and then how that's going to affect the business operations management, and will help you get 4 out of 4. So if you don't really feel too good with this influence, I definitely recommend just having a screenshot of it because it can really help out. Let's move on to processes. We're going to talk Gantt charts and critical path analysis, and I refuse for any of you guys to get those wrong because a lot of the time it's in multiple choice. They can come up in short answer as well, but it is definitely more common in multiple choice, and they're just easy marks to get. You just need to know how to do it right. But a lot of students don't really know the tricks on how to figure it out, or might just quickly skip past it because they think it's a really easy mark and they're not putting in the right work to do it. So I'm not letting any of you lose it. So the Gantt chart, and it's really easy to get them confused, but when you see the differences, the Gantt chart is the bars, and the critical path analysis is where we've got the actual drawing of the path. So that's how you can tell the difference between the two. So the Gantt chart is a type of bar chart, and it shows the schedule and completed work over a specific period of time. So it's obviously going to help with planning and tracking a project, and it can help see which processes have several steps and the number of activities that need to be performed plus what order. But it also can help you see what tasks can be completed at the same time, like when you're multitasking, the time frame, and then compare actual performance against planned performance, take corrective action when you need to. So here we've got a Gantt chart for Sam's Chocolate Shop, where it starts from when Sam's obtained the lease all the way to when he's commenced training. Um, Now, when you're looking at this, a lot of the tasks can be completed at the same time. So, for example, they're refitting the shop, but as they're refitting it and they're renovating it, they can also be purchasing the stock. As they're selecting and training staff, they can also be advertising the campaign. But obviously, they can't commence training until they've purchased the stock, which is why you can see through the bars that different activities are happening at different times. So here we've got this multiple choice, and we'll do this one together, but I've got others later that you guys are going to try. So this is asking what the Gantt chart shows. So my advice for multiple choice is always to actually cross out like A, B, C, D. I feel like when I was doing it, that always helped me a lot because I could clearly see, okay, it's definitely not this, it's definitely not that. And mentally I was going through all of them instead of just rushing through and just picking the one that seemed the most right. I actually had time to think about each. I can't stress this enough. Multiple choice is your game changer. If you suck at business reports or case study essays, the multiple choice weighs just as much as your business report. It's much harder to get 20 out of 20 on a business report or the case study essay than it is to get 20 out of 20 in the multiple choice when all of the answers are there. Now, obviously, multiple choice is difficult, it is challenging. They try to trick you on purpose. But if you keep it in your mind that every answer is there, you just need to pick the right one, you'll realize that that can actually be a really big strength of yours for the section. And multiple choice and short answers make up 60% of the exam. So if you already know, and for a lot of students, writing in the reports and the essays is their weaker area, doesn't mean you're not going to study for those areas, but you really can kind of tone in on those 60% of marks in the short answers and the multiple choice, which are easy to get because it's not as big in maths. So for multiple choice, my advice is to do as many practice papers as you can and as many past trial multiple choice sections as you can, because the syllabus has been around for over 10 years anyways. And the more that you do, you'll realize they just start to ask the same stuff. And it's the same structure. You'll realize they try to pull off the same tricks. So the best thing you can do is expose yourself to as much multiple choice as possible, because you really do want to be getting 17, 18, 19 and in that bracket, and not losing these marks that are already on the paper. So here we've got A, selection and training of staff will begin in May. So we're going to go select and train staff, but that's obviously not A because that's starting in March, not May. So then we can go to B. The shop will be open for business at the end of April. So it's open for business when it commences trading, but that's in June. So it's not B. Stock purchases and advertising will be done simultaneously. So we can go stock. So it's going into March, but then advertising isn't starting until mid-April. So it's not that one. So then naturally it has to be D, and we'll just check it. Some stock will be purchased before the shop is completely refitted. So it's completely refitted by the end of Feb, but they're starting to purchase stock in the beginning of Feb. So it's obviously D for that one. Now, critical path analysis refers to the scheduling method or the technique that shows what tasks need to be done, how long they take, and the actual order to complete those. And it gets very confusing because it's the shortest amount of time that it takes to complete all the tasks necessary. And that actually ends up just being the longest amount of time. So the one trick I need you to remember for this is that the answer for the critical path analysis is always the longest calculated path. But again, I'm going to take you through a sample. So each activity in the schedule must be completed to produce the final product. And this allows a manager to see what needs to be completed, what they can do at the same time, and to consider the timing of the tasks as well. So it provides direction, and it's a form of scheduling that can then improve the overall coordination and enable a mean of control. So as long as you kind of know a definition of what a critical path analysis is, you can then kind of go on and just talk about the importance of scheduling and timing for management and just for coordination and organization. So the key point in this is that when you're calculating it, never choose the path that has the shortest amount of days. Now, this gets confusing because a lot of the time it'll ask, what's the shortest path? What's the minimum amount of days? And because students see minimum or shortest, they instantly are like, okay, I'm going to calculate the path, and whichever one's the shortest is going to be my answer. But it's actually the shortest path that completes all the tasks. So if we're going to calculate it, and for example, if you were stuck between choosing B, task B, which is 8 days, or task C, which is 25 days, you need to choose task C because it has the most amount of days and it's longer than B. So that's why knowing this trick that it's always going to be the longest amount of days that it takes, that's going to be your answer. And that's confusing because you're like, oh, but task B has already been bypassed. But when you choose task C, those activities of task B get completed in it because you're doing it simultaneously, which again, very, very confusing. Trust me, I know when I first heard this and I learned about this, I was like, that makes no sense. How is the shortest path actually the longest one? But this trick works. So if we look at this question, number one trick is that they've already got what is the minimum number of days needed to complete the project. So a lot of students will just be like, oh, 10 is the smallest, so I'm just going to pick 10. And they wouldn't even calculate it. So that's the number one mistake. But the second mistake is seeing minimum and thinking that you can still, calculate all of them and just pick the shortest one, because it's the minimum number of days to complete the all activities of the project, which, like I said, is the longest path. So no matter what wording they use, if you ever get a critical path analysis question, promise me you're going to calculate each of the paths and then you're going to choose the longest one. So if we go in and we calculate these, we can do A, B, D, H, J. We can do A, B, E, I, J. You can do A, C, F, I, J, A, C, G, J, all different ones. So I'm going to give you guys a quick minute-ish, probably less, to have a think. I'm going to be going through them as well. Quickly do up the addition and see which one is taking the longest. And then I'm going to point out another thing that they try to trick you with. So if you calculated those, that was not a minute at all. I'm so sorry. If you're still calculating those, that's completely fine. But the longest path here is actually A, C, G, J. So that equals altogether to 17. So the answer here is C, and hopefully you got C or you were on the path to getting C. Now the problem here is that a lot of students are like, you know what, 33 is the biggest number. And if they knew this trick, we're like, oh, it's the longest path. They'll just go and pick the longest path that's in the multiple choice answers. But 33 isn't even one of the calculated paths. And what they do, Nessa knows that a lot of teachers just teach this trick and that students don't actually understand the process. So on purpose, they'll just put a random big number so that they can catch those students who skip the math and think, oh, I'm just going to use this trick and get the answer. It obviously doesn't work like that. So just because you see a really big number, don't be inclined to pick it. Still make sure you just quickly do that addition. It shouldn't take more than a minute depending on how long it is, but it's a guaranteed mark. And you wouldn't want to lose that mark in the business report or in the essay. So just steal as many marks as you can on these multiple choice where you know that you will always get it right as long as you pick the longest path that you can calculate on this. You must. I'm blackmailing all of you. You have to get it right. All right, let's talk strategies, which is performance objectives. And in my opinion, now when it comes to the strategies, my advice, and it really worked for me, you guys know how many strategies there are across the 4 functions. There's so much to memorize, and the idea of memorizing all of them in really great detail is insane. For me, especially, I was doing a lot of other humanities subjects as well. So to be able to like memorize all this stuff for business, but then also for modern history and legal studies and studies of religion too, and I'm sure it's very similar for you guys too, even with English and all your amounts of quotes and how close a lot of the exams are. It's not super realistic to know every single point in super great detail, like I said before. So what I did for all the strategies and for the processes, I picked out 3 that I felt really, really good with and really confident with. And those were 3 that I knew in really good detail and was very happy to write about. Well, not happy to write about, but I would have preferred to write about those ones. And tried to link those ones and pick those ones wherever possible. I still knew the other ones because I had memorized the syllabus and I was able to waffle them out if I needed to. I knew a general definition and could quickly explain it, but I knew 3 in really big detail, and this really helped me with my study because it's just a more effective method. Again, they're not going to assess you on every single strategy anyways, but the problem with that and the risk of that is that you memorize some that might not get questioned. Now, the powerful thing and the good thing with this and the fact that there's so many past papers is that you can go through past papers and you can kind of see a trend in which strategies are more popular than the others and which ones come up in a lot of questions. And one of those 4 operations is 100% performance objectives because it connects to every single part of the operations function, to the role, to the processes, and to the influences. So I really recommend knowing performance objectives, being able to define the differences between all of them, and like link it to wherever you can because it really does come in handy and it is likely to come up on an exam. And I just think that they're pretty good to talk about. So performance objectives are just the goals that relate to particular aspects of the transformation process. They're also pretty easy to link case studies to because it's stuff that we're aware of and you can kind of think about businesses, products or services that you like maybe have interacted with or that you own, and then link it to each of these performance objectives. But they represent targets that the business wishes to obtain to become more efficient, productive, and profitable. So that's quality, flexibility, customization, speed, cost, and dependability. Now, for each of these, the best thing about memorizing this strategy is that all you really need is a definition, and then you just in your head need to understand an example, and then you're completely fine to link it. So quality is just how well designed, made, and functional goods are, and the degree of competence with which services are organized and delivered. And the three main quality performance objectives are the quality of design, quality of conformance, and the quality of the service. Dependability is how consistent and reliable a business's products are. So in terms of a good, that dependability refers to how long the products can be useful before they failed, which is measured through the amounts of warranty claims made, because if a lot of warranty claims are being made, clearly it's not a very dependable product. While if it's a service, it refers to the consistency of the service and its reliability, which is measured through the number of complaints received. So in that case, I like to think of when you're going, I don't know, you might be going to a new nail salon, or a new, hair place. I'm not sure. Whenever I go places like that, or even to eat, I'm always looking at the stars on Google and the reviews. And obviously, if a store doesn't have the best reviews, you're not going to be very keen to go to this new service. Like if you go to a new eyebrow threading place and it's got like heaps of 1 stars of like how they messed up the complete shape, that doesn't show that it's a very dependable or reliable service to take part in. So that's how you can actually use the number of complaints received to actually assess the dependability. So that's dependability as a performance objective. Flexibility refers to how quickly operations processes can adjust to changes in the market, and it's very linked to time and speed. But they're related because the faster processing time will result in a greater likelihood that processes can be adjusted quickly, and it can be best achieved by increasing the capacity of production by implementing leading edge technologies. So leading edge technologies are the brand new technologies. In this case, I always like to think of Macca's, how they have like the self-serve kind of tablets that you can use, or even at Woolworths where they use the self-serve checkout, or Coles, compared to the traditional cash register, which shows the differences between the two types of technology. Now, speed is the amount of time taken for production and operation process to respond to changes in market demand, because market demand is always changing. Think about TikTok. Every like 3 days, there's like a new trend. You can't use, or like you can post like a song that was like trending 2 weeks ago, but every single week there's like a new song that's trending. There's a new sound, there's new trends, new dances. Everything's moving so quickly, and it's exactly the same in the market and how consumer preferences are changing. So speed is a very big and important performance objective that businesses need to keep up with to make sure that they're satisfying customer demands. So they can do that as quickly as possible through reduced wait times, shorter lead times, and faster processing times. Like I said, let's say we use the nail salon. If you're sitting there for an hour, and then they say like, oh, like 10-minute wait, but then it's an hour later and you're still waiting, that's not very good speed whatsoever. And a lot of the times it results in customers leaving. So wait times are really important. Same with speed when it comes to services in IT. Like if you've ever been on the phone with Telstra or Optus, forbid, but I've been on the phone with them for like 3 hours, and you're just hearing that annoying song, and you're on that wait time. And it's really frustrating because that speed is lacking, and that really takes away from the process. So think about speed and like patience, but also just the customer demands and how quickly our kind of preferences change, and how production has to respond to that. Now, customization is another really easy one to talk about, because it's the creation of individualized products to meet specific customer needs. So variation in product features such as color, size, and functionality offer high levels of differentiation in comparison to its competitors. But the cost of customizations are higher than the cost of mass producing standardized products, which is why customized products, customized shoes, even customized t-shirts sometimes can be like over like $100, but like a normal one at Kmart, like a normal white t-shirt, can just be like mass produced and standardized and $10 each. But think of customized products in your life, or anything that you might own that's custom, or even a lot of the time more luxury products are a lot more customized, and that's why they are costing more, because it's actually a higher cost of production. And finally, we've got cost, which is the minimization of expenses so that operation processes are conducted as cheaply as possible. Now, I know you guys already know this, but the number one, the foundation. Now, I know you learn about, increasing market share, improving corporate social responsibility, retaining customer loyalty, blah, blah, blah. Of course, there's other objectives and there's other business goals. But at the bottom line, I already know you guys know, that a business wants profit. The bottom line goal for every single business, and in every single way, anywhere possible, I need you to refer back to profit maximization, because that is the goal for every business. Every business wants to make a profit. But what's affecting profit? The expenses and the costs. So if you have really expensive production, like let's say I'm producing a t-shirt, I don't know, for some reason it costs me $90 to produce because it's customized, but then I'm only selling it for $100. I'm only making $10. So for me, what's the point? Well, if I can produce that at a cheaper rate, maybe $30, and then I'm selling it, I'm upmarking it to sell it at $100, then you've got that $70 profit. So for cost and in operations, think from like that business mindset. You wouldn't want your operations to be very costly. You'd actually want them to be as cheap as possible, which is why it's actually really worthwhile having the new technologies and the newest leading edge technology, because that actually ends up lowering costs because it uses the inputs better. It's a lot faster, it replaces labor, and it minimizes wastage. So even though there's that high initial cost to get, the best new machine, in the long run, it's actually very profitable. But businesses also seek to reduce supplier costs. They want to manage their inventories better, manage flexibility, and find distribution methods that are time and cost effective. Even with technology, really, really easy example to talk about is Woolworths and Coles and how they've replaced cashier workers with the self-serve. When you look at it, there's maybe like 10 self-serve machines at your closest Woolworths and only one person watching all of them, compared to, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, where there were 10 separate like cash outs and like cash register lines, and a worker in each of them that they have to pay per hour minimum wage. So from a cost perspective, of course, ethically that created, and socially that's created a lot of issues, and you've seen debates probably on the news and in the media that robots and technology are replacing workers. But from a cost perspective, and that's usually where businesses are at because they want to save as much money as possible and achieve that profit, that's actually so profitable, and that's actually the most effective way that they can ensure the minimization of expenses. So my advice with business studies every single time, even in the business report, something that always helped me was actually genuinely imagining, if this was my business, what would I do? And taking myself away from the exam and then being like, okay, this isn't Sally's chocolate shop, this is my chocolate shop. Like if I had customers that weren't happy with a marketing campaign, what would I do to change it? And putting yourself in that shoe, and in that kind of like business owner perspective, business management perspective, can actually really help you pick the right strategies, but also just write a lot better because you're writing what you know and what you're aware of. So that's something that definitely helped me, that I haven't really ever heard as advice, but made a big difference for me. All right, let's get into marketing. I love marketing. Let me just put it out there. Marketing and HR have my heart. Operations, like, it's love, hate. It's more towards hate. And finance is just pure hate for me. But please, in the chat, let me know. Surely we have finance haters in here. Surely. Surely. We're going to start with deceptive advertising, which again is something that a lot of us are already aware of, but we probably, like, if you see an ad that lies, we're not like, deceptive and misleading advertising. Like, we just know that, oh, this ad's a lie. But this is just an example of where you need to know the syllabus wording, and you need to know that dot point and the actual title of the idea, because yes, you can waffle on about businesses lying and businesses making false claims, but if you don't directly use that dot point of deceptive and misleading advertising, you don't get the mark. So that's just a really good example that where we already know what it is. It's very easy for us to waffle on about some of these ideas, especially in marketing when we're so exposed to it. Like, marketing is everywhere. Like, this is marketing right now. Everything is marketing. You open your phone, you leave the house, you go to the shops. Everything is marketing. So it's definitely one of those topics that a lot of you guys should find easier, especially if you're connecting it to businesses that you shop at or real life examples. But that's why knowing the syllabus is so important. It just makes those connections even easier and guarantees you higher marks in marketing. So deceptive advertising is where a business uses deceptive wording or includes false claims when describing the characteristics of their product. So there's different examples of this. We've got fine print, where they have stuff in the fine print, the country of origin. So they might say like made in Australia, because a lot of Australians want to support Australian businesses rather than businesses that are outsourcing globally and paying very low wages. Before and after advertising, like this one here, special offers, and the packaging as well. If there's a whole separate product inside of there, or if the packaging isn't a reflection of what the product truly is. Now here we've got this before and after advertising one, which is actually using two of these techniques. So less wrinkles in only minutes, yeah babes. That's literally a different person. That's not even the same person. That's not even the same person. And with how advanced AI and Facetune and a lot of these like Photoshop apps are, um, before and after advertising and really enhancing the after, especially in the beauty market, is very, very much on the rise. So you've got that before and after advertising. Obviously, you know, this cream or whatever is getting rid of this chick's wrinkles in only minutes. But another thing is also the fine print. So here it's saying less wrinkles in only minutes, but it says simulated imagery. So it's obviously it's literally admitting that it's edited, but when you look at it, you're not looking at that little fine print. And a lot of the time, that's what's happening with these advertisements. Now, the two main techniques for misleading and deceptive advertising are bait and switch. Now, bait and switch is a bit confusing, but for me, I understood it a lot better when I could actually connect it to a real life example. So I'm going to take you guys through that. But it's basically just advertising a few products at a reduced price. That reduced price and the cheaper price makes customers want to go and purchase it. But then when that cheaper price runs out, you're like, hey, sorry, we've actually got this, and it's a much higher price product. So that whole idea, like, it makes sense, but it's just like it was a bit confusing for me, at least when I learned it. So what made sense was the car dealership example that I was taught, because a lot of car dealerships can be like, you know what, like, look here, we've got these like 30 grand Mercs, come and get yours. And heaps of people are like, wow, that's so cheap for a Mercedes, like, I'm gonna go and buy that car, and they're like enticed to go and purchase it. But then when they actually go to the dealership, maybe they only had like 5 30K Mercs, and those have all run out. So now the car dealership owner is going to be like, oh, we're so sorry, we've run out, but we do have these 40K Mercs, or we do have these 50K Mercs, and you're already there, you're already at the store, you've already been enticed. So they've baited you in with this cheap price, but then they're switching to the more expensive one. So that's bait and switch. And then there's also just dishonest advertising, which is when businesses use words that are deceptive and make claims about their products that they don't actually possess, which, again, like I said, with beauty products, hair products, anything to do with the body. I don't know if this is like a universal experience, but that like TV shopping channel, if you know, you know, but that TV shopping channel where they've always got like fitness equipment and people showing like their before and after results with like fat loss shakes, or a lot of the time it's just got to do with like health and wellness and vitamins, on those TV shopping channels, and they're like, get results like in a week, lose 10 kilos, and just, you know, you just know that they're lies, and you just know that it's claims that the product or the service isn't actually possessing, but they're just actively making. And obviously that's a form of dishonest advertising. Now, one case study that I memorized for this one, for this dot point, was a Nurofen case study. So in 2016, this is how they used packaging to have this false and misleading claim. So they created Nurofen specific pain, apparently, which was this new product, and they were formulated for a specific type of pain. So it was a brand new type of Nurofen, and it can help target a specific type of pain rather than your just general Nurofen for all types of pain. But it was discovered that all of them were identical to standard Nurofen. So here's this packaging like Nurofen specific pain, but inside of them was the normal Nurofen tablets, but they were still charging double the price to what normal Nurofen is. So they've got two different products, but it's actually the exact same thing in there, just different packaging. But this Nurofen specific pain, they were charging double. So the ACCC took this to the federal court, and they were ordered to pay $6 million as a civil remedy, and then $4.5 million to settle a class action suit. So over $10 million just in legal fees. But it's not even just that. Like, one thing with deceptive and misleading advertising, same with fraud, and when you get into finance and you're looking at ASIC, yes, legal costs are a very big deal, and that's definitely going to affect their profitability. But even bigger than that is the reputational capital. This is like medicine. This is a brand of medicine for your health to help you feel better. So seeing a company like Nurofen lie to their consumers about a product that's supposed to improve their health and, you know, overcome sickness, left a lot of people in absolute shambles. It really, like, Nurofen low-key got cancelled. It detrimentally impacted their reputational capital, and then it decreased sales and overall profitability and just trust in the brand. Like, especially for a health brand, you want to trust. I'd like to think that we can trust Panadol that we're taking and medicine that we're, you know, putting inside of our bodies. So for Nurofen to lie about something like that, yes, they've lost all this money in legal fees, but the amount of money that they've lost and the amount of customers that they've lost, by this like kind of like messed up reputation now, and they're decreasing their reputational capital is far much larger than any type of civil remedy or any type of legal kind of costs. So it's really important to know the effect of reputational capital, which is why, especially when you get into HR and you're looking at like corporate culture, but also just the general like values of a business and how a business is perceived socially, their corporate social responsibility, all these ideas of how society responds to a business are so important, because that reputational capital is so, so important. And that's what leads to improved sales. And then in that, more sales, more profit. So establish your marketing objectives. Like I said, bottom line, profit maximization. You guys know that. But marketing objectives are just the realistic and measurable goals to achieve that can be achieved through the marketing plans to the SMART goals. So other ones are market share, which is the business's share of the total industry sales for a product. If they increase the market share, they've got more of the market, they've got more customers are making more sales, more profits. Expanding product range is also very, very important, because offering more products assists with long-term profitability and adaptability to consumer preferences. So for example, you can look at maybe like a ski shop which only sells skis and it's specifically for ski equipment, only that one hobby. Compare that to Rebel, who has like surfboards, fitness equipment, soccer, footy, tennis, like golf, every single sport you could possibly imagine they sell a Rebel. They sell equipment and clothing for as well. So having that expanding product range means that businesses that do offer more products have higher profitability because they're adapting to so many consumer preferences. And you can even think about that in your own stores. It's why David Jones and Maya and department stores are so successful compared to, single retail stores, because they're offering such a larger product line. Maximizing customer service is another very important thing. Customer comes first. Centering consumers in the business's focus means that you're getting greater sales, because you've got higher customer loyalty and higher customer satisfaction. Customer service is really important, especially nowadays when marketing is so consumer based, and it's so important on how the customer feels and their experience, because it's not even just about like getting that customer to make that sale once. It's that repetition and that repeated sale and that loyalty for them to return, which is why a lot of brands have, like Boost has the Boost cards, Mecca has the Mecca Beauty Loop, because it's loyalty and it keeps you coming back. And I know for me, like, I'll go to collect my Mecca Beauty Loop, you best believe I'm buying something. Anytime I walk inside Mecca, I just know I'm leaving with someone. And I know it's probably similar for a lot of you guys too, but customer loyalty and wanting to go back, especially like Mecca, like you want to move up a level, like if I need to buy, I don't know, like a new eyeshadow palette, like you best believe I'm going to Mecca instead of Sephora, because I want to get up to Mecca Beauty level 3. Like, you get me. But maximizing customer service is really, really important. And new geographic regions and spreading, so opening stores in new locations, greater distribution and greater online accessibility is really, really important too. So think about like Elite 11 Stacks, and how now they've gone just from online stores to now like Elite 11 opened in Parramatta. There's a Stacks in Broadway. And they're really like spreading that distribution. So marketing objectives are so, so important. Even though they're marketing objectives, these are objectives and these are aims for the business that come up in the other sections as well, and in the other functions. And you should consistently be referring back to objectives and business goals, whether that be like product differentiation, whether that be profit maximization, whether that be market share, in your answers. Now, whether that's short answer, business report, case study, it's all of them. It's all of them. Consistently refer back to the goal and like how it's achieving these goals, so that you can really accurately and effectively link the processes and strategies to these goals. So very simple case study example that you can use is Woolworths and Coles, because obviously they dominate the grocery market. So Coles has 30.3% approximately of the market, while Woolworths has 37.2%. So together, they've got, nearly up to 70% of the market. And obviously Aldi, IGA, Costco have other parts, but recently their market share has been declining because of such economy. And Aldi and Costco, they've achieved economies of scale, which is why they can sell their products so cheap, especially Costco selling stuff in such bulk. So as time goes along, you best believe this market share is going to change, and it already is changing. A lot of people are switching to Aldi because it is a lot cheaper. But that's just an example of market share. And I feel like market share makes a lot more sense when you can actually see the pie chart and you can see what a difference it makes. Like if there was a customer standing in the middle, naturally they're more likely to go to Coles or Woolworths than some little grocery mart or maybe IGA, for example. So a target market. Oh, see, I just love marketing. I just love marketing. It's Chef's kiss. A target market is a group of present and potential customers to which a business intends to sell its product. And the customers within the target market, they usually share similar characteristics. There's a primary target market, which is a segment that most marketing resources are directed at. And the secondary one is smaller, but it's the less important segment. Now, with target markets, think about your favorite store and how they target you, because you are the targeted customer. And think about what they're doing to target you. So, for example, if you look at Smiggle, let's just say Smiggle because I'm sure a lot of us shopped there when we were younger. The target market for Smiggle, I'd say, is like 4 to, I don't know. I don't want to cancel anyone who's still, I don't want to say the wrong thing. 4 to maybe 11, or maybe 12, like primary school age, maybe even into 13, 14. So their primary target market is children, and it's, young children who like stationery. And because of that, their marketing is all directed towards children. So that's why there's like a lot of animal imagery, and they've got really bright, like fun, like rainbow colors. And there's lots of toys in there, and all of their marketing, same with their ads, their catalogs, any marketing campaigns that they do are going to be targeted towards children. So for Smiggle, they're not going to advertise like to 8-year-olds on like TV at 1 a.m. Like, why would they do that? Why would they do that? But they can advertise through the store and the different marketing strategies that they're using in the store, with catalogs, anything online, even Facebook, because the secondary target market would obviously be the parents that are then buying their kids the gift. And in the end, the parents are most of the time paying for that, if not all of the time. So Smiggle, they can use like Facebook as well, and a lot of the time kids are with their parents, are going to see them scrolling, might see like a Smiggle really colorful ad and be like, oh, I want this from Smiggle, just for example. Other target markets, you can think about your favorite stores. So like if I'm thinking about mine, like Love Glassons, Love Mecca, like Cookeye, all of that, a lot of them are using TikTok because that's where, for those stores, it's women, I'd say aged 15 to late 20s. And realistically, that's the app that a lot of us are using. A lot of us are on Insta as well. So they're really tying in on that rather than putting ads online. I'm sure you guys have even seen like White Fox. They've got a lot of the ads on the buses now. They're trying to adapt your marketing strategy towards the target market is so important. So that's why knowing exactly who you want to target is very important. So think about different stores and what they're doing to target those people. Now, identifying and selecting a target market is so important because that then directs the strategies, which then helps satisfy the needs and the wants of the customers, and then achieves profitability by improving the sales. There's the mass marketing approach, which seeks a large range of consumers, and it assumes that individual customers in the target market have similar needs, so they're just going to use a single marketing mix. Costco is a very good example of the mass marketing approach because they've got like their catalog and they've got like their online website, but that's really it. Like, I've never seen a Costco ad online, but still everybody knows about Costco. Costco isn't doing this consumer preference and really trying to understand their customers. They just assume that all of us want this stuff in bulk, and naturally if you go to Costco, you're going to leave with something because they have that assumption that individual customers in their target market all have similar needs, and they have such an expanded product range as well, which then suits that. The market segmentation approach is another one, which is where they subdivide the market into groups of people who share one or more characteristics. So maybe it might be like mums who like to stay fit, Lorna J, for example. But then it enables them to design a marketing plan that meets the needs of their group because they can select which group they want to target. So target markets are really, really important. It's my favorite one to waffle on about, only because we're all part of a target market. Like, you guys are a target market at Aton. It's like everything is marketing. Everything is marketing. Everything is marketing. And finally, there's the niche market approach, which is a narrowly selected target market. So it's highly specialized, customized goods and services. And because it's customized, like we said before, it's higher cost of production. So the price needs to reflect that because it's so specialized. Price skimming means people are willing to pay the added costs. So examples of targeting like a niche market could be travel agents or stores like Hobby and Co. Same with like EB Games, like specifically for gamers. And it's specializing in services to specific regions and magazines for specific hobby enthusiasts as well. So here we've got a multiple choice question from 2015. So Sam runs a business that designs and sells custom-made high fashion clothes. In which type of market is Sam's business operating? So is it intermediate? Is it mass? Is it niche? Or is it resource? I'm going to give you guys a second because I also need some water. I'm talking a lot. So intermediate immediately we already know that intermediate and resource are not part of this dot point. And this is why knowing the syllabus is so important. So then we've got, it's either B or C. So is it mass or is it niche? Now, when we're looking at it, it sells custom made high fashion clothes. We already know just from custom made, automatically it's niche, because if it's a niche market, it's a customized good or service. There, bam, you've got your 1 mark. Super fun. Now, let's look at monitoring and controlling, because I feel like I used to ignore this. I honestly still to this day, even at uni, like I'm learning how to teach all this content. I always forget that this is a dot point. So I wanted to bring it in because, like I said, a lot of these ideas that you can kind of skip always end up being, it's always the ones that you don't study that are in the exam, and this was one of the ones for me. So it does come up quite often in the exam too, which is really random. But this is a 2017 business report question and a 2018 short answer, both which have featured the importance of monitoring and controlling as a business process. So here we've got the short answer exemplar for you guys, which you guys can add to your notes if you need a little bit more on this. So monitoring and controlling is central to the business as it allows them to develop a financial forecast to meet the needs of the business. One thing about this is a lot of students, when they're writing about monitoring and controlling, they forget to link it to the finances and like the cost benefit analysis and maximizing profits and all about costs. But if you're not doing that, you're not getting the marks, because it's all about comparing those results. And it is a financial thing, because marketing are the only ones that are generating profit. So finance needs marketing, all about that interdependence that you look at in every single function. Marketing is so core, because they're the only ones that are actually making money for the business, because their marketing is gaining those sales. So it's really important to remember that, and to remember that in monitoring and controlling, you have to link it to the financial forecast. So because there's an increasing need for further training of staff to use machinery, it needs to be reflected in the price of the product, which can then ensure profit maximization. So like I also said before, you always want to be linking back to those goals. So here we've got profit maximization, maximize profits, and then also achieve profit maximization, maintain customer retention, increase sales and market share. So you can already see in this 4 marker how many times it's linked back to those goals, which is why it's really important. I honestly just recommend have like a flashcard where you've got like common business goals, and do a definition of profit maximization, a definition of increasing market share, a definition of customer retention, a definition of product service differentiation. Have those definitions and be able to define them and link them wherever possible, because I promise in every single response, any process, any strategy, any influence you're talking about, you can link it back to one of these goals. All right. This is hard for me to do. We have to do finance. I'm scared that there's going to be people who like finance are going to fire me, because that happens on TikTok. Like I write a caption, I'll be like, I hate finance, and people like, I can't believe there's people out there that hate finance. What? I can't believe there's people out there that like finance. Like when I chose business, I didn't ask to do math. Like I didn't ask to do math. We're going to be looking at global economic outlook, and a lot of the stuff that I put on here for finance is a lot to do with global markets, with currency, with fluctuation, with interest rates, because a lot of this stuff is overlooked in class. A lot of the time it's rushed in class. And I know from my friends, but also from myself, this was the stuff that I just didn't understand at all. Like as soon as it brought like international markets and like the appreciating Australian dollar, like anytime I saw a multiple choice question like that, I was like, goodbye. I was like, not today. Not today, because the other finance stuff, especially the strategies, I know the processes are definitely more challenging with the ratios and making sure you write the correct ratio, but also figure it and solve it correctly, and putting all the numbers in right. Of course that's challenging, but I just found that this was really hard because you're operating on that global scale. Like personally, I don't know, I've never borrowed from an overseas bank. Like ask me about Commonwealth. I don't know, all of finance, I'm not a fan, but I wanted to put this in for you guys because this section, especially anything that's got to do with globalization and finance, they are where most students are losing the most marks. So let's look at uncontrollable finances, which are the 3 dashes for this point. So it's availability of funds, interest rates, and the global economic outlook. So when I say uncontrollable, I just mean influences that are part of the external business environment that you genuinely can't control. So it means placing appropriate financial management strategies to minimize the negative effects. One example of that is like, for example, COVID was like an influence of the external business environment. There was nothing that businesses could do to just be like, you know what, COVID's over. We found the cure. Like, it's done. Everybody opened up again. that was a part of the external business. You could have not done anything to get over that, but you could have put in strategies to minimize the risk. And a lot of businesses did that and were very quick to open online stores and kind of adapt to that external business environment in a time where the economy was really struggling on a domestic level in Australia, but also internationally. And with all the trade barriers as well, with deliveries, there were problems as well. So globalization has created more interdependence between economies and their business and financial sector because of the how much they rely on trade for expansion and increased profits. Now, global economic outlook refers specifically to the projected changes to the level of economic growth throughout the world. So there's either a positive outlook or a negative outlook. Now, positive outlook, just imagine like rainbows, sunshines, everybody's happy, lots of economic growth, and that's positively affecting business financial decisions. So in this time when it's positive outlook, everybody's working. So there's very high levels of employment. Because there's high levels of employment, guess what? Everyone's getting paid. Because they're all getting paid, everyone's got a very highly disposable income. So people are getting money, they're getting a lot of money, everyone's working, everyone's happy. They're like, okay, let's go spend this money. Consumers want to spend because they want to spend. Higher demand for businesses, which means they need to increase their supply, which means because they're increasing the supply, the businesses are spending more because the customers are spending more. Since the businesses are spending more and they need to increase that supply, they need to hire even more people. So there's even more people working. That's just even better supporting the economy. It's just like everybody's happy. There's lots of money going around. It's a good time. Now, negative outlook is the complete opposite, which is that when it impacts financial decisions of a business, guys, it's already been an hour. I'm losing it. Financial decisions of a business in a negative way. So this is the complete opposite. Now, there's very high levels of unemployment because people aren't working. They're a lot more conscious of how they're spending their money, which means that there's lower demand from consumers because they're not as keen to spend and they're looking for cheaper options. Because there isn't that much demand, the supply has to be lowered. And because that supply has been lowered, so are the jobs, so are trade, so is everything. Everything's just down. So basically positive, everybody's happy, everybody's spending. Negative global economic outlook is the complete opposite. Now, case study, this is a really easy statistic to have, is Qantas, because they reported an annual loss of almost $2 billion because of the coronavirus pandemic. And you can imagine how that government policy and just the overall implications that it had globally, how that could affect the airline business. And the Australia flag carrier's boss said trading conditions were the worst in the airline's 100-year history. So you can see how the economy and that negative economic outlook at that time then reflects in a loss of profit. So that's just a really simple statistic. I feel like not every single case study has to be a statistic, don't get me wrong, but teachers love to see it and your markers want to see statistics in there. And personally, I don't want to be memorizing 15.72%, 35,600. No, I like statistics like this because memorizing okay, Qantas lost almost $2 billion because of COVID. That's a really easy, quick one to memorize that will really support your study as well. Now, availability of funds refers to the ease with which a business can access funds for borrowing on the international financial markets. So that means they're going overseas to overseas banks, institutions, companies, and governments, and getting money from there to raise capital. But conditions and rates apply depending on the risk, demand and supply, and the domestic economic conditions. So, for example, the global financial crisis was in 2008 or 2009, and it had a really big impact on the availability of funds for companies, because a lot of companies will go overseas because they see that it's actually cheaper for them because of the difference in the exchange rate. And if a country has an exchange rate that has a positive benefit on us and on our Australian dollar, it actually ends up being cheaper to just borrow it from over there. The interest is also cheaper. Maybe they have lower interest rates over there. But what happens is that if something like the global financial crisis was to occur, or if there's a very kind of big impact on the global economic outlook, or even just the domestic economic outlook in that country, maybe if there's a war or there's a conflict, the interest rates can sharply increase and the exchange rate can really rapidly fluctuate. And that reflects in an even higher level risk of lending, and actually means that you lose that cost benefit that you thought you had. You thought, oh, I'll just go overseas. Maybe they have 2% interest rate. Here we've got 5%, but then that interest rate or the exchange rate ends up appreciating, and then they actually end up just having to spend more. So Qantas, for example, since the global financial crisis, have actually seen lower supply in Australia and overseas because there's been so many closures of financial institutions and the lending criteria is a lot stricter. Um, and this has affected their availability of funds because the credit rating was higher, which meant more interest, which makes it even riskier but even more costly to borrow money because interest rates are the cost of borrowing money. So this is just an example of the difference in case studies where you can have exemplar ones, which are like general scenarios, or you can have the statistic. But hopefully you can see why having a mix of both can really support your case study essays. Now, interest rates are the cost of borrowing money. I can't go to Commonwealth and be like, hey, I need 10K. They're like, yep, 10K, buy. Because, like, where's their profit? Again, they're a business. Every business wants to make a profit. So, interest rates are where banks and lending institutions and finance companies are making their money. Now, the higher level of risk in lending means a higher interest rate. So, what businesses will do, they'll relocate offshore or they'll expand the domestic production so that they can increase the direct exporting. But because they're doing that, or maybe because they're moving their production overseas, they need to raise the finance to undertake these activities. And they can do it here. You can get the money from Australian banks, but a lot of these businesses, especially the ones that are, expanding into that global market or these really big international corporations, they're more tempted to borrow overseas because they can take advantage of the lower interest rates. Like I said, every business wants profit. That's their goal, and interest rates is a cost. So if they can take advantage of lower interest rates in maybe a third world country or another country compared to Australia, where a lot of the time you guys will see on the news, especially when it comes to buying houses, everyone's talking about how high the interest rates are. They want to take advantage of that, and from a business point of view, why wouldn't you? Like, it seems like a pretty advantageous risk. But the problem with that is then the risk of that is the exchange rate, because if the currency fluctuates, you could actually see that cheaper interest rate eliminated, and it actually would have been just cheaper to borrow from here. So another learn to, which is really important to know, because again, the learn tos, if you guys are confused when I'm saying learn tos, you can open up your syllabus and you'll see the syllabus like that we know are like the dot points. So for role, influences, process, strategies, and then effectiveness for HR. But learn tos are above those dot points. Those are the learn abouts, the dot points that we know in those subsections. But the learn tos are about, there's usually 8 to 10. And the learn tos are specific ideas and questions that NESA really want you guys to be able to understand. So they're expecting that you, throughout the business studies in the course, learn how to answer and be able to analyze the influence of government and the global market on financial management, which means because those are specific ideas that they've singled out, they're much, much more likely to come up in the exam. So if you're struggling to study, you don't really know where to start, you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much content, what do I focus in on? Write down these questions and see which dot points you can connect, because a lot of the time these are the ones that are going to be coming up in the exam, and that's a trend throughout all the papers that have come out for business studies. I'm just going to quickly have some water because I don't know if you guys can notice, but I'm starting to mess up my words. So the government influences a business's financial decisions by making it through its economic policies. So they've got monetary and fiscal policy, they've got different legislation, and government bodies who monitor and control the business environment. So the number one body that you need to know for that is ASIC, which is the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. Don't get this confused with the ACCC, because the ACCC is for marketing and ASIC is for finance. So it's important to know which pieces of legislation and which government bodies are in different functions. So ASIC is an independent statutory commission who is accountable to the Commonwealth Parliament, and they enforce and administer this piece of legislation. So that's the government body, but they're putting through and they're enforcing the Corporations Act of 2001, which is going to protect consumers and investors from fraud, and reduce unfair practices in any areas, whether it's investment, life insurance, banking, superannuation, or just general insurance in Australia. I really, 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 really recommend that you guys have a definition for ASIC, only because I've seen so many multiple choice questions on it. And sometimes it'll even like have as a sample, like as one of the possible answers, like independent statutory commission. But also in short answers, very likely that it comes up because, like I said, government is learned too. And even in operations it comes up. So government, it's really important to be pretty aware of it and know it in some good detail. It's one of those more annoying ones that you don't really want to study and that you can't really waffle, but NESA knows that, and that's why they consistently ask about it. So trust me, learn from my mistakes, know what ASICS is. So they collect information about companies, such as their financial information that companies have to disclose in the annual report that they release each year. And if any business is found to breach these laws, ASICs are the ones who investigate it, and then they determine the appropriate remedy, whether that's civil or criminal. But failure to comply with them leads to deterioration in the business's reputation trust. So it's very similar to what we saw with the Nurofen case study example before, where yes, they lost all this money and they lost all this cost in legal fees, which is what will happen with ASIC as well, because they can take it to court and it can result in very high legal fees. But those legal fees also affect, and that whole media, all the media attention that they're gaining, but just the general practice of fraud or any unfair practice, like society perceiving that, limits the reputational capital. It's going to decrease it, and just trust in a business, because you don't want to support a business that's committing fraud. I don't know, personally, I wouldn't. So, yeah, the reputational capital is so important, and it's something that a lot of students don't really write about, but it's something that we all feel pretty like sure about in ourselves. And I'm sure you guys know businesses that don't really have the best reputation. You guys can think of like Lush, for example. They've got a really good reputation when it comes to corporate social responsibility, but also just environmental sustainability. And because consumers trust them, they're more likely to buy their products, and any products that are produced with environmental consideration, they lead to improved sales and improved profitability because consumers trust that brand. Same if a consumer like trusts the quality of a brand, or trusts the return, or trust the customer service. Reputation and trust are so important. And on the low key, like, you didn't hear this from me, but very easy to waffle on about, just like I have been in this lecture. So company taxation is another government influence. The main thing you need to know about this is that it's just levied at 30%, but all incorporated Australian businesses are required to pay company tax on the profits that they've earned. And if it's at that 30%, but it needs to be paid before the profits are distributed as dividends to the shareholders. So obviously that's affecting a business's profitability. Now, we've reached it. We're up to processes now. Now, for the ratios, you know what? Some people like it, and I respect you if you do. I like, no disrespect when I say that I hate the ratios. There's just too much going on. Like, if it was just the math, fine, but having to like describe the ratios and then like link it to a strategy, like, I don't know. I didn't pick math. I picked a business. But respect if you like them. I wanted to put up these notes for you because they are such a game changer. So I've got them for liquidity, profitability, efficiency, solvency. So each of the financial objectives. But if you're not downloading these slides, that's fine. Like, I'm not going to force you, but please, if you're going to screenshot one thing from this lecture, let it be these 4 slides. They are so important because it's connecting everything together. Because a lot of the time, they're not even just going to ask you for the ratio. A lot of the time, students will just study like, okay, I'll do a couple ratios. Oh, I know how to find the ratio. I'm fine. A lot of the time, they're not even just asking for that. They might ask for the ratio and then ask for a comparison of what's acceptable, or the comparison to the industry average, or they'll ask you what strategies can be put into place to improve the ratio. That's where students go wrong, where they're only practicing the math and they're like, yeah, I know the dot point. Yeah, I've already studied processes. And they've just read over the ratios and they're like, oh, I'll just do the math on the day. But then it's those short answer questions that come up that really can affect you. So that's why I really recommend these tables, because they're so helpful. It's basically got the objective and then which ratio links to which objective, which is really important. So liquidity is how quickly a business can meet its short-term debt. It's got the description of what that is. It's got the formula. It's got where it's sourced from, whether that's the balance sheet or an income statement. It's got the answer. And then it also has got what's acceptable. And it's really important to know the acceptable ratio. Because there's different acceptable ratios and percentages depending on which process you're looking at. And that's how you can actually make a judgment or make a comparison to the industry average or just in general. And then it's got the exact strategies and what you're going to do to fix it. So liquidity, for example, because it's got to do with meeting short-term debt, cash flow strategies make a lot of sense here. So discounts on early payment, distribution of payment, and factoring, because they're all effective ways to manage your cash flow and quickly get cash to meet short-term debt if an emergency comes up and if you're at that time. So that's why I really recommend memorizing and having just a copy of these. They're also on my TikTok, on the A Notes TikTok. if you guys are keen on some more notes, but I just really recommend them. This was all my notes that I had for the processes. Like, this was all I had. I didn't have any written notes. I just had these tables, and I would just read over them and then do practice questions, and it was the best practice that I could do, because there's no real point in like memorizing like a bunch of notes, when you need to be able to put these into practice, and this is how you put them into practice. This is how you do it. So here are the profitability ratios. We've got gross profit, net profit, and return on owner's equity. Then we've got efficiency. Now, for the accounts receivable turnover ratio, which is where you divide sales by accounts receivable, please remember to divide it by 365, because one thing, a lot of the time students also don't study processes, and I used to think, like, I remember my teacher saying like, oh, they're always going to give you the ratio. So I was like, great. Like, if they're going to give me the ratio, then I just have to calculate it myself. Like, that's fine. I know how to use a calculator. But when it comes to the gross profit ratio and the net profit ratio, they don't tell you how to calculate gross profit or net profit. So you need to memorize those formulas on your own. And also when it comes to the accounts receivable turnover ratio, they'll tell you sales, divided by accounts receivables, but they'll leave out that last step of dividing by 365 days, because you want to find the average amount of days it takes to get your accounts receivables back and be paid back. But they leave out that divided by 365. So even if you use the formula they gave you for the accounts receivable turnover ratio, the gross profit ratio, and the net profit ratio, even if you just use what they gave you, you'll still get it wrong, because that's not enough. They don't give you the whole picture. So it is really important to memorize those extra steps as well. And then you've got solvency, which is the debt to equity, and the strategies that you can do for each. So I really recommend this, because it also links the processes and strategies together, because they really do go hand in hand, and it can really just support your study in being a lot more effective. Now, when it comes to strategies, my favorite ones to talk about are cash flow management and profitability. I try to avoid working capital whenever I I possibly could, unless it was asked about, only because I feel like in a lot of business scenarios, cash flow management 100%, very easy and applicable to write about. But even more than that, in every single scenario, profitability management comes up. Why? Because every business wants to make a profit. I'll try to stop saying it. Let's talk about distribution of payments, discounts for early payments, and factoring, because they're different, but they all achieve the same thing to improve your cash flow. So distribution of payments is all got to do with when the payments and when you owe money. So your accounts payable. So for example, a lot of businesses, when it comes to end of financial year in June, a lot of them have a lot of bills due, and maybe they're paying a lot of their bills annually. But what you can do, instead of having this massive outflow of money because you owe all this money that you got to pay once a year, you can distribute those payments maybe quarterly, or like sub-annually, and like every 6 months. So instead of having all this money in June going out, and maybe you've got all these fees like to pay and all these accounts payable in June, but then one of your machines breaks down, but because you're paying out all this money, you don't actually have any money to replace that machine, and then you're in this outflow and in this negative deficit. You don't want that to happen. While if you distribute the payments and you have them spread out throughout the year, you kind of make sure that your cash flow is a lot more balanced and it's really flowing throughout the time, which ensures that they can generate cash inflow before making any payments, and that you're always just secure. The other one is discounts for early payments. So distribution of payments is the best option, because it's not affecting your profit at all. You're just paying things more frequently, rather than annually, or like very rarely or occasionally, and that's supporting your cash flow, so the expenses aren't all due at the same time. Now, discounts for early payments and factoring are great strategies as well, but they do affect your profitability. So discounts for early payments, let's say I'm a kitchen builder, I just built you a 50K kitchen. I'm not going to be like, hey, the second the kitchen's done, I want my 50K. A lot of the times you're my accounts receivable, and I'm going to say, hey, you've got 90 days to pay me back. That's completely fine. But let's say 60 days pass, and my workers hate me and they all leave me, and I need to get new workers, but I don't have the money to do it. But hey, you owe me 50K. I can go to you and be like, hey, I know you've got another 30 days to pay me, another month, but if you pay me now in the next week, I'll give you 5% off. And as you, the customer, you're like, oh, mad, I can just quickly get this money and I actually have to pay less. And that discount, um, then gets me my money quicker. So that's great for me, can quickly get my money. Great for the customer because they're getting it at a cheaper price. But for me, I'm not getting that full 100%. I'm losing that 5%. It could even be 10%. It depends on what the discount you negotiate. And a lot of the time, then the customer's like, you know what, I don't want 5, I want 7. And then you end up losing even more money. So in times of emergency, discounts for early payment is great because you can just quickly get your money. But do remember that that does obviously come at a cost and you're not getting the full amount. Now, factoring is different because factoring, and a lot of students do get confused with what factoring actually is, but it's the selling of those accounts receivables to a third party for a discounted price. So discounts for early payment, like you as the business owner or the manager, you control that. You're determining the factors of that discount. You determine what that discount is. You make that negotiation. With factoring, now me, so we've got you, I built this 50K kitchen for you, you owe it to me. But now we've got a third party. So I'm going to this factory company, I'm being like, hey, this 800 lecture watcher owes me 50K, but I need the money right now. What the factoring company does is they're like, okay, we're going to give you 70 to 90% of the 50K within 48 hours, but we're going to keep 10 to 30%. Now, every factoring company has different amounts. So sometimes they'll keep 10%, but they can keep up to 30% as well. And then you get the remaining amount. And then the factoring company are the ones who go and collect the money from you and they deal with you. But then I never deal with you again because you know what? I got my money, peace out. So factoring companies is when you're selling those accounts receivables to the third party. You sell it for that discounted price, so they get to keep 10 to 30%. I get my money really quickly, usually within 48 hours. And if I need the money right away, especially in an emergency, it's great, not my problem anymore, don't have to wait on you, but they're going to go collect it from you. So that's the difference with factoring. Now, when in terms of how it's going to affect your profitability, it definitely goes in this order where distribution of payments is great because profitability wise, and again, even though it is cash flow, we do have to think about profitability because it is the bottom line. Distribution of payments is the best because it might be affecting your short-term profitability because your inflows and outflows are going to be different throughout the months rather than just having this massive outflow. But in the long term and throughout the annual year, it's actually much it's helping you in case of that emergency. Discounts for early payments, like I said, you're losing that money. Yes, you do get your money quicker and your receivables quicker, but you are losing that percentage depending on what you negotiate that discount to be. And factoring is confirmed loss 100% and usually a lot larger than the discount for early payment because it is from the company, and that can be 10 to 30%. So my advice with factoring is do remember that you'll get 70 to 90% of the accounts receivables original value back, but then they can keep 10 to 30%. I really recommend just memorizing those numbers because when you are attaching it to a business scenario or in a short answer, when you're writing about what factoring is and the advantages or disadvantages, those are the details that can really help you get full marks. Profitability management, though, is my favorite one to talk about. So we've got expense minimization, which is the easiest strategy to talk about in finance. Like I said, you guys know I don't like finance, but this strategy will work every single time. So expense minimization is a financial strategy that aims to achieve the most cost-effective way of delivering goods and services to the required level of quality. So all expense minimization is like, where can we cut costs? Where can we make it cheaper for us so we keep more profit? So they can do that by eliminating waste, reducing unnecessary spending, because by doing that, they're increasing the productivity and efficiency and then still achieving profit maximization. Some of the easiest strategies to achieve it are casualization of the workforce, downsizing or relocating operations overseas, outsourcing, and bundle pricing. So if we look at outsourcing, for example, and outsourcing your production, maybe to a third world country. When you look at Shein, you look at Nike, the conditions in those factories and the money that they're paying these workers is horrific and disgusting on a ethical, social, human level. But from the business point, not that that makes it right, but from in a business mind, when they're thinking about costs and how we can keep as much money as possible, it doesn't affect them because they're like, you know what, we get more profit. So they can kind of ignore that. And at that kind of bottom line, they've got that financial gain of the profit, which is why a lot of companies do outsource. And there's a lot of ethical concerns with Shein and businesses like that who are producing in those countries and not paying minimum wages that are ethical and right. Same with casualization of the workforce. When you look at it's casualization of the workforce, but it's also hiring younger workers because they have a lower minimum wage rate as well. So instead of paying a 30-year-old like full minimum wage, you can pay, I don't know, an 18-year-old $19 an hour, which is the minimum wage. or casualization of the workforce in the way that casuals don't get annual leave or sick leave or paid leave, which means there's less costs to keep them, and you can just hire a bunch of casuals and not have all these extra costs that you have to pay, which is then minimizing your expenses. So profitability management, very easy one to write about. Same with bundle pricing. That's the only reason Costco can be as successful as it is, because they have everything in bundle, and then they achieve that economies of scale to ensure their profitability. Now, profitability, the only way, now when you think about profit, it's literally just sales. You either make more profit by having more sales or lowering your costs. So this is what's lowering your costs, expense minimization. But if you want to have more sales, like I said before, the only part of the business, the only function that's actually making money is marketing. Marketing is the only function that's actually making money, because marketing makes the sales. Marketing is sales, and they're making all of the money for the business functions to operate. So if you need to improve sales, you need to be looking at your marketing mix. So revenue is the income to earn from a business, but if you want to achieve it, they have to have a clear idea about their marketing objectives. So what their sales mix are, what their pricing policies are, and what their objectives are. So obviously, if you want to improve your profits, then you should definitely look into your marketing and be like, okay, are we marketing well? Do we have the right strategies? Is our pricing method or strategy working? What do we need to do to improve that? Because if they improve their marketing strategy and they're retaining customers to a higher level, but they're also really like honing in on their target market, you can guarantee that that's going to improve sales and thus improve profits. So marketing strategies are employed in an attempt to increase sales and revenues. Changes to the sale mix can affect revenue, which is crucial to maintain a clear focus on customer orientation. And the pricing policy obviously works as well. But if you are investing a lot of money in a project that, for example, isn't really supporting, you should definitely move to marketing. A lot of companies now as well are turning to social media marketing, because a lot of the time, especially if you're advertising on TikTok, yes, you can pay for TikTok ads, but otherwise TikTok, you can do branding for free and, participate in trends and promote your product. And a lot of the time it's a really successful and much, much more cost effective way to not only improve your marketing strategy, especially if your target market is young teenagers and young adults, which is the main users of the platform, but also to lower your costs, because it is a much cheaper form of advertising. So 2-in-1, we love social media advertising, very good to waffle on about, let me tell you. Let's talk about global finance, which is the last part of this. Trust me, didn't want to put it in, but so many students get these questions wrong. I'm talking about the like payment in advance, letter of credit. You guys know. I'm going to take you through and explain what it is. So another learn to is compare the risks involved in domestic and global financial transactions. So this has got to do with exchange rates, which are just the values of one country's currency in terms of another. This is where, like, if you buy shoes off StockX, like sometimes I've gone to buy shoes and I'll see them and it's like 150. I'm like, bro, mad. And then you go on and you realize that's like, it's actually like US dollars. So it's like sometimes even double, and you're like, great, like not buying those shoes anymore. But same when you go to another country, like if you've been especially to Europe where they've got the euro, or like the UK, you'll know that the dollar is a lot more expensive compared to ours. Like I was in London, and I saw like this pencil case for 20. I was like mad, but then because of the currency rate, it ends up like being 40 plus. Because of how much they fluctuate and the difference in the appreciating and depreciating dollars. So if you struggle to understand exchange rates, just think about anytime you're traveling overseas, or if you're buying from another country, and same like when you do online shopping and it's like, what currency are you shopping at? Like, what country are you in? And you have to choose, like, are you shopping with the AU dollar? Are you shopping with euro? Are you shopping with yen? And you pick the actual dollar. So exchange rates fluctuate over time because of the level of demand and supply. And because of that, it's a further risk for global businesses, because it's never like the exchange rate is always at one point. Every single day it's changing. You can see it on the news. They're always talking about it. But the fluctuations affect the profitability of global businesses and their ability to meet financial objectives. Because a lot of times you might borrow overseas, or you might go to an overseas supplier because they're cheaper. But then if the exchange rate changes and it fluctuates, you end up losing that cost benefit. So let's talk about appreciation, depreciation. Economics students, I know you're fine. personally, I was not an economics girl, so I want to take you guys through it if you're not either. So appreciation is an upward movement of the Australian dollar against another currency. So it raises the value of Australian dollar, of our Australian dollar. So 1 unit of foreign currency buys fewer Australian dollars, and 1 Australian dollar purchases more foreign currency. So when the dollar is appreciating, it's the best time for us to buy overseas. It is the best time because we can actually purchase more currency, while for them, it's the worst time because they're buying less. So exports are more expensive, which decreases their demand, and that reduces the international competitiveness because their foreign currency is buying less here. So they're like, well, why would we buy from Australia when we don't get as much value for our money as if we were to buy from another country, or if Australia's dollar was lower? But for us, it's actually the best time for us to import and for us to buy things from overseas because of the increased demand. Depreciation is the opposite. So it's the downward movement of our currency against another. So it lowers the value of the Australian dollar, where 1 unit of foreign currency buys more Australian dollars and 1 of our dollars buys less. So for us here, you don't want to buy from overseas when there's that depreciating dollar, because you're going to end up spending more. So exports are cheaper, which increases their demand. So it's great for other countries. They like when our dollar has depreciated, best believe everybody wants to have trade deals with us and buy stuff from Australia because they can buy more from here and get it for cheaper in comparison to when our dollar's appreciated. But for us, it's not a good time for us to buy anything from overseas because our imports and importing that back into Australia much more expensive, and it decreases the demand of the import market, but it's still improving the international competitiveness for Australian export businesses and businesses who are sending stuff out, because other countries want to buy stuff from us when our dollar is depreciating. They get more of a cost benefit. So basically, when the Australian dollar is appreciating, I just like to think like appreciative. I appreciate when I can buy more overseas because our Australian dollar purchases more foreign currency. While when it's depreciating, we do not appreciate when our Australian dollar cannot buy us as much overseas. So if you are looking at online shopping in the future, check where the dollar is at. And if we are, if the Australian dollar has appreciated in comparison to that foreign currency, it's the best time to buy. You're actually getting more bang for your buck. So interest rates, we looked at them before. They're just the cost of borrowing money. But because of the appreciating and depreciating currency fluctuation, that's what's actually affecting the interest rate. So you might think like, interest rate like overseas, like I said before, it's 2%. It's a great time to buy it. But then depending on whether that dollar or that like currency appreciates or depreciates, you can lose that benefit and end up paying even more because maybe 1 Australian dollar, like let's say the Australian dollar depreciates, and then we actually have to end up spending more because it's more, the Australian dollar buys fewer foreign currency. It gets a bit confusing, but hopefully, like, I really recommend having, these are the literal dot points that I memorized. And it just really helped me. I had to drill it into my brain a bit, but if you can try to explain it to yourself and just read over it and really understand this part, like this second dot point for each of them is the only main idea you need to understand. Everything else just builds off that. But if you can understand that when the dollar is appreciating, we can buy more foreign currency, they buy less. And when it's depreciating, we purchase less foreign currency, they buy more Australian dollars. Okay, methods of international payment, super fun. It's not actually fun at all. So let's talk about methods of international payment. Now, for this example, I'm going to give the hypothetical that I am buying t-shirts from a supplier in China, because I promise you, that sounds random now, but I promise you it'll make more sense. In terms of the risk for the exporter, we've got payment in advance, letter of credit, bill of exchange, and clean payment, but we're going to go through them. So payment in advance allows an exporter to receive payment first and then arrange for the goods to be sent. So like I said, I'm buying t-shirts from a supplier in China. My supplier gets my money first, so maybe 10K for these t-shirts. They get the 10K first, and then they arrange it to be sent. So those t-shirts haven't even left China. They're still there, and they're not going to be even arranged to be sent out, or no delivery, no nothing, until my exporter, so the Chinese supplier, receives my payment. So the payment exposes the exporter to no risk because they receive the payment first before they send the goods. So my exporter, this Chinese supplier, there's literally no risk for them. Like imagine like you're buying from overseas supplier and you give them all your money first before you've even received the product, of course there's no risk. They've already got their money. They're in another country. Like, it's done for them on their side. But as an importer, very few will agree to the method because it's very high risk. Because first of all, there's no guarantee that you receive what you ordered or in the time frame that you needed because you've already given all your money. Money in this way and the payment is your form of security. But if you've given all of that up because you've paid in advance, you can't guarantee that when the goods are actually sent that you get what you want. And if you, let's say, like, maybe the quality isn't there or you don't get the full order, that supplier is a whole different country and there's, barriers and time differences and all these different things that come into play that make it even harder to get back in contact with them. And then how do you send everything back? And it's just a whole issue, and it's a very big risk as an importer if you give all your money to the supplier first and you pay your exporter in advance fully first before you get those goods, because you don't have that guarantee. Now, letter of credit is a document that a buyer, so the exporter can request, the buyer, so me, that I can request from my bank as a guarantee that the payments of goods will be transferred to the seller. So it's issued by my bank to the exporter, promising to pay them a specified amount once certain conditions are met. So maybe the conditions are once I get guarantee that they've left the country, once they arrive in a warehouse facility in Australia. So for example, this is like me as a buyer. I go to Commonwealth and I'm like, hey, I need you to sign this letter of credit. I'm going to buy 10K worth of t-shirts from this Chinese supplier. Can you please sign this promising that I'll pay the money once I get proof that the t-shirts have arrived in Australia? But once I commit to that letter, I can't withdraw. So once I sign that letter, I legally cannot withdraw. I have to go through with that deal. So maybe let's say I sign that letter and then I find another supplier in Singapore who can give them to me even cheaper. Doesn't mean I can go back to my original supplier and be like, hey, sorry, found someone cheaper, because I've already been in this physical contract now where I've promised to pay and you have to go through with that. It's very popular with exporters because they rely on overseas banks rather than the importer. So for an exporter, my Chinese supplier, they'd probably and more likely be much likely to trust Commonwealth Bank, one of the biggest banks in Australia, than some random 20-year-old girl who's buying 10K worth of t-shirts. When they see that a bank is a part of it, the exporter is a lot more willing and it's a lot less risky for them because they know that they've got that third party playing that role. Now, clean payment is an open account method and the exporter ships the goods directly to the importer before the payment is received, and the importer does not send the payment until they receive the goods. It's got a invoice as well, which requests the payment 30, 60 or 90 days. So this is where my Chinese supplier is going to actually send me the goods. They're going to directly import the goods to me. I haven't even paid yet. I get my goods and my promise is that I've got this invoice, and they're like, okay, well, you've got to pay me within 30 days or you've got to pay me 60 or 90 days back. But I've already got my goods. So I get my t-shirts and I haven't even made my payment yet. Now, this is great for me. Live, laugh, love. This is the opposite of payment in advance. Payment in advance, the exporter receives the money first. Clean payment, exporter receives the money last. So with this now, great for me as an importer, I'm getting all my t-shirts. But as the exporter, it's very, very risky because who says that I pay it on time? Who says that I pay it at all? There's not a bank backing this up. Like, it's literally just between us. So as an exporter and that Chinese supplier, they wouldn't do this deal with me unless they were very, very confident that I'd be able to pay it back in full and also by the agreed time. So there definitely have to be a strong level of trust there. Now, a bill of exchange is the final one, and it's a document drawn up by the exporter demanding a payment from the importer at a specified time period. So the exporter holds the power here. So they can either have a document against payment where they're like, to me, you can collect your t-shirts but only once you pay, or they can say, I can collect my t-shirts before paying, and then that's a document against acceptance. So it depends which document and which bill of exchange they end up drawing up. But it's a very commonly used payment because the exporter maintains control over the goods until the payment has been made. So the exporter still gets to control whether I collect my t-shirts after or before paying, but they still have that control where they get to decide that by drawing up this document, and that's a bill of exchange. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, when we're looking at it in terms of risk for the exporter, for them, obviously, no risk if payment in advance because they're getting all their money first. Like, it's very risky for me as an importer, but in terms for the exporter, they get all their money, no risk there. Letter of credit still has that risk, but again, because the bank has that role in it, there's that guarantee that the money has to be paid, and that makes it a lot safer because an exporter from an overseas country is more likely to trust a very significant bank rather than a random individual. The bill of exchange also, it's less risky than the clean payment, because clean payment, as an importer, I'm not going to pay them until I get my goods and I have that invoice. While with the bill of exchange, the exporter still, like we just said, gets the control of when they get their payment, and they still have that element of control and organization. While clean payment, I'm getting all my t-shirts and I'm not paying them for up to another 90 days. And it's just like the money's just hanging in the air. So that's the risk for the exporter. And it's really important just to know this order, because in a multiple choice especially, they love to ask about this. They love to. Okay, we're going to finish up with HR. If you're still watching and going in strong, very sorry for how I'm messing up my words. Been talking for nearly 2 hours straight now. It's a lot of content, a lot of business words, but we're going strong. I wanted to finish with HR because I was like, you know what, if you start operations, like pretty hard, not too bad. Go marketing, like it's like this, and the marketing's up, and then finance for me, absolute pit, and then HR is going back up, and we end up on a much lighter tone. But we are going to start with current legal framework. Sorry to like gaslight you with this live, but current legal frameworks and this influence is one, again, learned to, but also very often ignored. I used to hate studying because it's just so annoying. I was like, I don't want to learn about this. And it's like very wordy, and it's got to do a lot with contracts and legislation. I was just like, I'm not really in the mood, but it is ignored. And yet it still ends up being one of the most assessed questions for when it comes to influences in HR. So first, you've got the minimum national employment standards, which provide just like the minimum condition for employees. So some of them are like maximum weekly hours, public holidays, annual leave, etc. And that extends to minimum wage, which is the employee's minimum base rate of pay for the number of hours that they've worked. And employers can't set a pay rate below the minimum wage. So if you're working in Australia, there is a minimum wage, and you will at least be paid that money legally. That's the minimum. Now, the difference between awards and enterprise agreements, it's so important that you know this because they ask about it all the time. They've even asked, I know my brother, he's in year 12, and in his trial paper, the actual business report asked about whether an award or enterprise agreement would be good in the business report. Like, I haven't even seen that. I thought they would only do it in short answer, but they can bring it up in the business report as well. So I want you guys to be prepared. Now, awards, my trick is think participation award. Everyone gets one. So awards are legally enforceable formal agreements made collectively between employers and employees and their representatives at the industry level. And it's a modern award, consists of like a base pay rate, overtime and penalty rates, allowances, leave and loading, superannuation entitlements, and it applies on top of the national employment standards. And then the basis for a negotiation in an enterprise agreement. So basically, if you work in retail hospitality, there is just a general retail award and a hospitality award that everyone gets. Your contract, whether you work at a different store to your friend, it will be exactly the same because you guys are under that award, and it's got those base conditions. It's legally enforceable, but it's made collectively at the industry level. So let's say, like, for example, I used to work at Sportsco and I was under like a retail award. They didn't sit with me and be like, hey, what do you think about these pay conditions? Hey, do you want overtime? Hey, these are your allowances. No, it's the retail award. And if you work at most retail stores, that's the type of legal framework that they do have, where it's like, here's his contract. And it's literally just the retail award. Same if you go work for hospitality or you work for a fast food company, same thing. They don't sit with you and negotiate, what pay would you like? You're getting minimum wage. You're going to get minimum wage. And that's what happens with awards because they're at that general level. Like I said, participation award, everybody gets one. Everybody gets one. Now the difference, and the only reason I say that is because enterprise agreements are collective agreements made at a workplace level between an employer and a group of employees about the terms and conditions of employment. Notice the difference in the name itself. Awards, like you're awarded this. Enterprise agreement. If it's an agreement, there has to be two sides, right? So in the award, everyone's just given it. You don't get a say. Like that's just the bottom line. Enterprise agreements, the employer and the group of employees actually come to agree about the terms and conditions of the employment. So this is where they actually start to negotiate pay rates. They negotiate the penalty rates, overtime, allowances, the hours of work, and their leave. And they genuinely have to come to an actual agreement. And it obviously can't include unlawful terms, and it has to have a dispute settlement procedure. But enterprise agreements is when it's actually within a business. So you sit down with your boss, you sit down with your workers, everyone comes together and they're like, okay, this is our contract, this is our specific pay. And obviously it's going to go above the award and above those minimum conditions, because why would they have it when they could just have an award? Like, if you obviously want to offer more to your employees, and especially for bigger businesses, especially in office jobs and industries like that, they're going to be putting in these enterprise agreements. So that's the difference between the two. Awards, like I said, participation, everybody gets one, and enterprise agreements are the agreements between the employer and the employees, so the group of them, coming together to talk about their terms and conditions of employment and reach a new contract. Now, work health and safety, that's all established by Safe Work Australia, because they've conducted research and developed national standards, codes of practice, and common approaches to work health and safety laws. Now, the main law for this is the Work Health and Safety Act of 2011, which requires that businesses provide a safe system of work, that they reduce risk to employees in the workforce, that they take reasonable care, and that they meet the requirements. Now, one aspect of this is workers' compensation. I'm sure you guys have heard of workers' comp, which provides a range of benefits to an employee suffering from an injury or disease related to their work. It's provided to families of injured employees when the injury or disease was caused by their work. So here we've got this case study of James Hardy, who was an employer at a cement manufacturing company, but he didn't actually warn his employees of asbestos and its health effects on their job sites, and that led to numerous employees suffering negative impacts, and also death and very severe sicknesses and diseases, because they didn't have the proper safety equipment to be in those conditions and around that asbestos, which then affected their health. And that's not on them. As the employer, your responsibility is to have those work health and safety laws and to be actively implementing that into your practice and into the workplace. So if that's not there, that falls back on the employer, back on the business. And this is all administered by WorkCover New South Wales. Now, not only does workers' comp have a very large effect on profitability, forget the money part, the reputation part, but just the genuine ethical part. When you go to work, you expect that you're safe and that you're in a safe environment and that you've got the right equipment, especially if you're in these conditions. So on a social and an ethical, on just a humane level, but of course from the business perspective on a cost level, workers' compensation is very, very, very important to consider, and the work health and safety laws are the absolute bare minimum of any business to ensure their workers are safe and healthy. Now, another part of the current legal framework is discrimination, which occurs when a policy or practice disadvantages a person or group because of one of their characteristics, whether that's age, gender, disability, etc. So anti-discrimination law was designed to protect employees from direct and indirect discrimination in HR, and to prevent discrimination and avoid fines, employees need to comply with legislation and audit all their policies and practice to ensure that they don't discriminate. Now there's different anti-discrimination laws. So they've got the Sex Discrimination Act, the Anti-Discrimination Act, they've got the Affirmative Action for Equal Employment Opportunity for Women Act of 1986. There's different anti-discrimination laws, but the most important part of this, again, relates back to work health safety laws as well, where yes, there's fines and yes, there's legal costs if a worker is discriminated against and they take that to court. Of course, there's legal costs. It's a whole procedure. It's a timing thing. But on top of that, the media attention that receives affects their reputational capital. So if a business is caught out for discriminating women or discriminating a particular minority group, society won't support it. Consumers will lose their trust in the business. That affects their reputation. No one wants to support that business by providing it with sales, and then that's going to obviously decrease sales, decrease profit maximization. I hate to it feels wrong to keep tying everything back to money. It actually sounds messed up. This is not my personal beliefs, but from the business perspective, you always have to be in business studies at that business management perspective. For them, bottom line profit maximization, that's what they care about. So it's very important that throughout the exam you can connect it back to this and keep making those links back to this goal, because that is the objective of every single business and just the foundation of business studies is making a profit. That's what a business is. That's literally definition. The goal of a business, the whole purpose is to make a profit. So whether you're talking HR operations or marketing, even though profit maximization's got a lot to do with cost from finance and marketing sales, you can link profit maximization to every single part of the syllabus, including current legal framework. Now, equal employment opportunity, which is EEO, refers to the equitable policies and practices in recruitment, selection, training, and promotion. So if they want to reflect and if you want to see the level of equity in a business, you can actually see that through the opportunities that that business has for women and minority groups. Because that shows that the business has like a positive work environment and that that's promoted. So let's talk about the processes. So you've obviously got training, which is developing the skills, knowledge, and attitude that leads to superior work. Then you've got development, which refers to enhancing the skills of the employee in lines with changing and the future needs of the organization. But like you guys would know that the HR processes are very short. Like it's just the four. It's actually the strategies that are a lot longer. So when it comes to memorizing, I know I like was able to define each of them and like write a couple lines for each, but I knew the strategies in much, much more detail. And I definitely feel like that supported me in both my trials and my HSC. So four processes, I'm not saying ignore it, but in terms of your study, the 4 dot points compared to, I think there's 7 to 8 strategies, like you want to hone in on those strategies 100%. Strategies that I feel like came up a lot were leadership style, job design, and recruitment. And the strategies are really good to apply to business scenarios. So I definitely recommend knowing the strategies in pretty good detail. There's leadership style, which refers to the ways that managers communicate with their employees to inspire and motivate them to work together to achieve an organization's goals. Now, whether that's the autocratic leadership style, where there's one boss, very high level of control, and all of that control is just streamlining down. The workers don't really have much to say. They just hear the decisions and act upon them. There's that approach, which of course has its advantages but also has its disadvantages. The advantages is that that high level of control is maintained, and in times of emergency, decisions can be made really quickly, and it can really help increase productivity in those like kind of emergency conditions. The disadvantages of an autocratic leadership style is that there's no sense of teamwork or collaboration, and a lot of the time workers don't feel respected nor kind of heard from, and because of that, that feeling of neglect or that feeling that there's not much consideration of them, that can reflect in their work, it can reflect in their productivity, it can reflect in staff turnover and workers leaving or their high absenteeism rates. It all depends. The opposite, of course, is the participative or the democratic approach, which is where, yes, there's still that boss and that kind of level of hierarchy, but everyone's working together. So let's say there's a big business decision that needs to be made. Maybe the boss sends out an email. It's like, if anyone has any ideas, please come to me. Or maybe they even do a big group meeting and they're like, oh, I'm thinking about investing in this company, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. The advantage of that is that there's a very high level of teamwork, and the workers do really feel um, just that sense of connection and really do feel cared for and important because they're being considered in significant aspects of the business. The disadvantage of that, though, is that it is quite timely, and when you do have to make very quick decisions, hard to be like, hey guys, whenever like we're gonna have a meeting, let's all come together. Like especially in times of emergency, you got to quickly act upon something, especially if like the like business, for example, is about to go bankrupt. Do you really have time to be like, everybody staff meeting, what do you think we should do? Like depending on the situation, different leadership styles will definitely suit, and each of them have their advantages and disadvantages. But I definitely recommend learning that strategy because I feel like it comes up a lot. I've seen it in a lot of past papers. Now there's job design, which is the number, kind, and variety of tasks that a worker is expected to carry out in the course of performing their job. So let's say you go to working for retail, maybe your job design is working the cash register, customer service, talking to customers, unboxing deliveries, hanging up clothes, cleaning fitting rooms. I don't know. Your job design would just be the types of tasks that you have to do and how many you have to do. And then there's recruitment, which is the process of locating and attracting the right quality and quantity of staff to apply for employment vacancies or anticipated vacancies at the right cost. You can either internally recruit, where you go to your workers and be like, hey, we need someone new to do this position. Would anybody like to stand up? Possibly have this promotion. Or you can externally recruit, where apps and like websites like Seek and Indeed, or even like recruitment, like having those like recruitment agencies and going to those offices to speak to people who can then go and find jobs for you and help support you in that process. There's obviously different options, but these three I feel like are some of the best ones to learn. Plus rewards. Plus rewards. If you're not writing about rewards, what are you doing? Monetary and non-monetary rewards. if you know, like if you have written about rewards and you feel confident, like you just know that that's a good strategy, it's going to work every time. It's got to work every time, because anytime you've got to talk about motivation or they ask about absenteeism, staff turnover, any of these issues, corporate culture, you know these people, like, and even for us, anytime there's a reward involved, best believe you'll be on it. Best believe I'll be on it. Like if there's a reward, best believe I'm going to work harder and I'm going to show up. Like, and I'm sure you guys are the same. So with strategies, definitely recommend those four. Like I said, there's obviously the other ones, and you should still know all of them and be able to define them and understand them. But like I said, what worked for me was memorizing a couple in really good detail. And these, if you respect my opinion, or if you wanted to know what worked for me, these were the ones that did it. Now let's talk about human resources, the indicators of effectiveness, because effectiveness is that extra section in the syllabus, apart from role, influences, processes, and strategies that doesn't come up in the others. So you've got the benchmarking key variables, so absenteeism, levels of disputation, changes in staff turnover, worker satisfaction, accidents, and corporate culture. Let's start with absenteeism. Absenteeism is just workers aren't coming into work. So there's very light, like you guys know, like absent days at school, like same thing, absent days at work. If a workplace has high levels of absenteeism, clearly there's something wrong with the workplace. Maybe it's the boss, maybe it's the culture, maybe it's the job design, like you don't know what it is. But and you'll be able to decide depending on the business scenario that they give you. But if a business has high absenteeism, there is a core issue there, and workers are responding to that issue and kind of disputing, fighting back by not showing up to work. So that's absenteeism. Levels of disputation is the amount of conflict going on. So are they fighting with their boss? Are they fighting with each other? Are they fighting with like management? Are they fighting with reception? I don't know. Like, where's the dispute happening? How much disputes are there? Naturally, disputation is very inevitable in businesses. Not everyone's going to get along, but if there are very high levels of disputation, a lot of company problems, it is showing a problem with the human resource management, and that there's a much deeper issues at the core, and obviously a lacking sense of effectiveness. Changes in staff turnover all have to do with how many workers are leaving. So let's say you're looking to send your kid to a new school. If you were going to say, like, you've got like a child in year 6, you're about to send them to year 7. If you went to a school and you went to maybe your local high school, and you see that 45 teachers have left in the last 2 years, that's not really showing that that school, it might be the best fit for your child. Because if a lot of staff are leaving, it's showing that the human resource management isn't very effective, and there might be a core issue and problem with the staff or the treatment or just the workplace in general, that's resulting in this turnover. So staff turnover are just the amount of staff that are leaving. Worker satisfaction is obviously just what it says, just how satisfied the workers are. Now, let's be honest, it's a very common thing that nobody really, really loves their job. Like, there are definitely people, don't get me wrong, they're very passionate about the job, that really like their job, but at the bottom line, it's still work. So this whole idea that everyone's going to be 100% satisfied, 100% motivated is very unrealistic. But worker satisfaction, you should still like your job. No one's going to no one's going to pick, 24 hours of work 7 days a week, but you should definitely still be satisfied with your job. Definitely feel happy with the work that you do, feel respected, feel cared for, feel confident in your job design and the leadership style that's, working there, and the recruitment processes, the level of rewards, all of that. You want to feel satisfied with your workplace. And if workers aren't satisfied, then it's not showing a very high level of effectiveness either. Accidents is very, very important. It's a very big sign of effectiveness, because we were looking at work health and safety laws before. If there's a very high level of accidents and a high accident rate, it's showing limited consideration for work health and safety laws. But again, legally, that's not right. But it's also just showing not much consideration for the workers, and just a messy foundation if a lot of workers are hurting themselves, injuring themselves, catching sickness, disease at their workplace. It's not very effective. Corporate cultures all got to do with the business and its values, how close everyone is. I know businesses that go out for group dinners or go grab drinks after work and really have that strong bond, is showing a stronger corporate culture compared to other businesses that have very high levels of disputation. Everyone's very competitive, no one gets along, nobody talks, and it's got that vibe. So I wanted to pop in these definitions for you guys in case you wanted to make flashcards. Like I said, you can download the slides and use any of these notes or add them to your own. So these are some of the key HR concepts. So we've only got 6 minutes left. I did put in these multiple choice questions And these are just 2 short answers, just so you guys, for your notes, they're just some random things that you guys can assess yourselves on. But just to practice, I want to quickly go through this one with you guys though, because I do have some final tips before I send you off. Here's the one I was talking about right at the beginning of the lecture, where I said they'll take multiple choice questions that are directly from the syllabus. So this is one of them. Which of the following are examples of operational performance objectives? Now, we already know it's D because we memorized the syllabus and we went through this in the lecture, but we know that it's D because it's straight from the syllabus, and you don't even need to be able to define here flexibility, cost, dependability. But if you had memorized that one dot point, that one strategy, instant 1 mark in the exam. Now, if you had memorized it, you'd know visibility isn't 1, variety isn't 1, and variation demand isn't 1 either. So then that naturally gives you the answer D. I just want to show you guys that, not to I don't want to be like, yeah, like I'm right, but my teachers always used to be like, you know what, memorize your syllabus. And I was like, bro, like it can't possibly be that important. But when I saw examples like this and I did past papers and I was losing marks because I hadn't learned the syllabus and it was really easy marks like this, it really changed my mindset. And I hope that this can kind of influence you in the same way. But if you were looking just for some like practice questions to do, I wanted to pop these on the slides for you guys. Now, my final tips. Number 1, sorry, not a good time. Memorize your syllabus. I'm going to leave it, but you get me. Please, for me, please do it. Number 2 is planning. Now, don't get me wrong. My business reports never looked like this. Same with my case study essays. I never planned as much as this, but I always had some planning on my page, because when you're attempting to write it, it'll just really help your structure. Like for me, here we've got like outline 1 legal, 1 ethical issue. I would have just written like outdated machinery, exploit regular differences, then recommend 1 strategy, and then I'm going to pick like monetary, non-monetary rewards. And I would just quickly write them out, because then in my executive summary, I knew exactly what to write about. I wasn't writing very vaguely and being like, this report will outline 1 legal, 1 ethical issue. We'll also recommend 1 strategy. Instead, I was like, this report will recommend the strategy or the human resource strategy of monetary and non-monetary rewards, which can in turn satisfy the competing interests of 2 stakeholders, which are blah, blah, and blah, blah. And it just helps you be a lot more specific in your executive summary, which in turn will get you higher marks. But also helps you structure all of your headings throughout the entire business report, and will help you structure your case study essay as well, and just be a lot more specific, know which case example to link to which strategy, which process, which influence. It just helps the overall structure, and structure is a mark in both. It's one of the criteria points for both your business report and your essay. So it might seem like a little thing and be like, you know what, like I only have 3 hours. I used to think this as well. I'd be like, I have 3 hours, like I don't have time to plan. But I saw a difference in my marks when I could just actually just sit with it, especially my reading time. I would read through and I'd be like, okay, what strategy am I going to pick? Which influence am I going to write about? What 2 advantages will I pick? And then as soon as I got to the paper, I just quickly write those down. And that was in my mind as I was structuring, as I was writing the intro for the essay, the executive summary for the report, and it really just supported me. Now, my final tips, like I said, I've gone through these throughout the exam. Make multiple choice your absolute best friend. It's 20 marks as well. You guys saw just then, like it can come straight from the syllabus. The mark is always going to be there. You just have to pick the right one. So the more practice you can do, and if I can give you one piece of advice, please do as many practice multiple choice questions as you can before your exam. It weighs just as much, and it, like I said, if it doesn't help you, if you know that your business report or your case study essay aren't very strong and you don't have too much time to improve that, it's much easier to grab those extra marks in multiple choice than it is to improve in your business report. Plan how you're going to approach the exam, so what order you're going to do it. Time management, I have gotten asked before what I recommend for it, but I honestly just recommend doing the paper in order, because multiple choice, you can really get the confidence there. Short answers, again, it's 40% of the exam, and those two, like I know people who started with the essay and the report, but for me they're worth 40, and the multiple choice and the short answer are worth 60%. So I really tried to hone in there, where it's literally easier to get the marks there and get full marks in like a 4 out of 4 and like a 1 mark like multiple choice than it is to score 20 out of 20 on the business report or the case study essay. I know you might think like, oh, what about timing? But a lot of the time you'll end up finishing short answers and multiple choice quicker than the recommended time, and you have time and you're completely fine to finish your essay and your report. But trying a practice paper at home is a good idea, and just doing it in full, because that worked for me, but it might not work for you. Everyone's different, and it depends on your strengths as well. If you really know that multiple choice is your bad section and you know you're just absolutely going to flop that, you don't necessarily have to do it first. You could leave it last. and like maybe you don't finish the exam because you've left it last and you really want to focus in on your report, which you feel really confident in or which you really want to improve on. It completely is up to you. And if you've got some questions or anything specific, please leave it in the chat, or you can even comment it on the TikTok. I'm happy to help you guys out. Practice responding to learn twos. Those are those learn twos that I was talking about, like those kind of 8 like questions that are separate from the learnabouts, which are the actual dot points of content, but they're common questions that a lot of the HSC papers directly take ideas from, and they'll a lot of the time just use it word for word. So if you really are looking to grab some extra marks, be prepared for the learn twos. And I do recommend having 2 to 3 businesses for your case study essays and just case studies in general if you ever bring them up. I personally use Macca's and Qantas, and I recommend having stats as well. Like I said, you don't have to have stats every single case study is like 2%, 2 billion, I don't know, like 500 million, like whatever the numbers are. You don't have, it doesn't have to be purely statistical, but kind of balancing that with actual scenarios and actual examples of the content really will just make your report seem even stronger and support your essay. So thanks for sticking with me, guys. I'm so sorry. I know my voice at times I was losing my words, but there is just so much content in business, and I wanted to try and get through as much as possible. I'm very sorry if this felt very rushed, but we really wanted to be able to look at the hardest topics and the hardest ideas of each of the functions just so we could be as productive and effective. We're trying to achieve those objectives of business. But all the best for your HSC. Thank you so much for coming to this lecture during your school holidays. I'm very proud of all of you. I really do wish you the best in your HSC. It's so exciting that you guys are nearly done, and congratulations for graduating. And I'm manifesting band sixes for all of you. Please just try your best. Please, I know saying this is like, oh, like it's easy for you to say. But I know how stressful school is, and ATAR feels like everything. And trust me, at the time it really does. It did for me. It was like my whole life. But I'm out like 2 years now, and even honestly 2 weeks after I finish the HSC and after you finish it, it'll be out of your mind. You'll be free from it. So definitely push, but do not burn yourself out. Remember that your ATAR does help you get into courses quicker and help you with unis, but there's always other ways, and essentially it doesn't matter. ATAR does help, but the bottom line is just a number to help you get into uni quicker. I hope some of you guys have received early entry, and if not, I hope you guys can receive some early entries before. But either way, all the best with your HSC and with your ATAR. Thanks for coming, and if you guys need any extra resources, please just comment it on my TikTok. I'm genuinely happy I'm running that account, and if you guys have any dot points that you'd like kind of summarized in a 1-minute video, if you guys want some extra notes, any extra resources, anything posted for business studies, please just comment it on my TikTok. I'll get back to you. Even if you have any general questions about what's going to work for you, or study advice, study structure, what to do right before the exam, any questions, please just comment. I'm always active on there and I can get back to you guys. But all the best with your HSC. Thanks for watching, guys.